Corporate America is just one giant dumpster fire today. That's how this conversation starts. And honestly, a lot of people feel that way right now. The problem isn't just bad systems, it's that people are afraid to tell the truth. They spend so much time talking around the truth instead of actually naming it, and that creates friction, misalignment, and even burnout. Today's episode is about the rebalancing act, how to manage yourself first and then help other people do it faster with less pain. Carol's story is powerful. Her husband was having an affair, and she had to make a change. A real one, not theoretical, not incremental, life shifting. She wanted to climb the corporate ladder. She wanted to become a vice president. And she proved she could do it. She walked the talk. She showed herself she could lead. But somewhere in that climb, she got away from the work that actually she wanted to do. That resonates with me deeply. In my own personal story, I got fired. But the core tension is the same. Corporate had plans for us, but they weren't necessarily our plans. She talks honestly about how the hours sucked, but they were also hours she chose. Her corporate job didn't suck. It just didn't work for her world anymore. Let's roll right in. All right, welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we've got Carol Enneking. She's the author of the book, The Rebalancing Act, Wisdom from Working Women for Success That Matters, where she does not believe in work-life balance, but rather pursuing meaningful success without burning out or losing yourself along the way. This book has won multiple awards in categories for female empowerment, nonfiction business leadership, and personal development. Carol, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Carol. And for those of you listening, we met on Podmatch. So the AI algorithm definitely got this right because when you talk about work-life balance, it's the first question I love to ask, Carol, because to me, work-life balance is like an equation. So
Yeah.
how do you define, in order to solve that equation, if it's worth solving, we have to understand the variables. So how do you define the work that you do today?
How do I define it?
Define it, yes.
Well, that's a great question. I define it as the purpose that I can be useful for. What is it that I'm uniquely gifted at and meant to do here on earth to help make the world a better place? My work has to do with my purpose and my calling. I think that's ultimately what all of us hope to be doing with our work. So, it is part of your life, but it shouldn't rule your life. But they always say if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. And I do love what I do, so I guess it doesn't feel like work. But I'm not a charity. I am trying to make a living. I'm trying to make money for retirement and live a comfortable life and, all the things. But for me, ultimately, my work is defined as what can I be doing to help make this world a better place? And what is it that I have that I can contribute to that conversation?
I love that, Carol. So how do you apply that definition? What are you doing to make the world a better place right now? What is this work that you're doing?
Well, and what's funny is when I was in my 20s, I got to go through an exercise. I worked for a huge oil company. We had great professional development, and I went through an exercise where I got to define my uppermost values. And one of mine was contribution. And the reason it became funny is that very oil company had me in a role a couple years later that was managing credit cards. And really the way people make money on credit cards is putting people in debt. And I didn't know it at the time. I don't think I understood it fully, but it was really a clash of values because I didn't feel like the work I was doing mattered. I didn't feel like it was making a contribution. And ultimately, I got really burned out. I was like, it just doesn't feel great to be working so hard to try to market something to just get people to spend more money. And I mean, this was in the 90s. This was before before we were all inundated with credit card
Yeah, I was
offers
gonna say,
everywhere we
probably
turned. And
worse now.
yeah, but it's just kind of funny because I always knew I wanted to make a contribution, and I loved learning and development. And it's what led me down my career path, but my career path took a lot of unexpected twists and turns. And so I was kind of the poster child of rather than follow the expected path, forge the path and make your own, even if you only know the next step right now and you don't ultimately know where it's leading you. How do you continue down that path? And it took some twists and turns because I was an entrepreneur for 18 years after being corporate. And then I guess I was a glutton for punishment or a little, I don't know if I was crazy or brave, but I went back to corporate after being on my own for 18 years. And I think I had this sick need to kind of prove to myself that I could make it in corporate after all these years of especially teaching leadership. So contribution for me was about helping people be better leaders, better managers. I thought I knew everything there was to know about leadership, and then I got to go back into corporate and be a leader and see just how hard it can be to walk the talk every day and come up against all the obstacles that people face in those jobs. And so I did that for 7 years, and then I went back out on my own and I was like, now it's time. It's time to write the book, and it's time to pay it forward. And so my mission now and the way I want to make a contribution is to help people redefine success before it redefines them. Because in the midst of all that and all the juggling I did and all the different work twists and turns, I kind of lost myself in the chase. I was so busy trying to do and have and be everything to everyone, and I don't know that I did myself any favors because, I mean, it took its toll in so many different ways. And sadly for me, it took having pretty major health scares for me to finally say, I don't want to work like this anymore. And I mean, you shouldn't have to go through breast cancer to decide that you don't want to, work yourself to death. But that's kind of where I found myself. And so part of the rebalancing act for me, which that's the name of my book, but part of my rebalancing act is how do I manage myself and my activity level so I'm focused on what matters and I'm very intentional about my legacy? And then how do I help other people figure that out faster, easier, and with less pain than it took me to figure it out? So that's a long answer to your short question, but that's really how I define purpose these days and
Carol, I
contribution.
really love that. I also love so one thing that's interesting on the show is I have kind of like guests coming on as they're corporate, they hate corporate, they go do the entrepreneur thing. And then what I
Yeah.
love about what you just said, you circled back. So
Yeah.
I want to like go into that a little bit because I find what's interesting. Let's start with why you left corporate and did 18 years of, being an entrepreneur. What sucked about corporate and what did you like about it, I guess? Let's start with that. What sucked about corporate and what did you like about it? The first time around.
The first time around. So, I mean, what sucked is probably gosh, it's been a while. I've been at this 35 years, but what sucked about it was probably just I wanna say the hours, but it wasn't so much the hours that they made me work, it was the hours I chose to work because I did the 70-hour work weeks. I was on a plane all the time. I was a high potential at one of the world's largest firms at the time. I had the, career trajectory that would have led me to a very lucrative future, and one day and I remember I was on this reorganization team, and one day we started talking. We were a company that forced ranked people from top to bottom, and I was near the top. And we started talking about how you could only fall, I think, 15% in the rank group every year. So we thought, okay, we've got 7 or 8 years before they kick us out. And it's funny how you start to define your existence like that. But it was like they had all the plans for me, but they didn't match my plans for myself. And that's what sucked because ultimately what led me to leave wasn't that I hated my job. In fact, I loved my job. I'm a workaholic. I worked too hard, but that's also, it kind of paid off for me, so to speak, because it helped get me the promotions that I loved and the career advancement that I craved. But what sucked for me was that my husband also had a great job, and I wanted to be a mom, and I started my family. Well, actually, before I got pregnant, I ended up leaving the big company because they wanted me to tell them 6 places I would move to because they wanted me to go do a job in, like, supply chain or pricing. I don't know if you can tell from our conversation so far, but I'm pretty outgoing. I love people. I love variety. I do not love staring at a screen all day. And when they started talking to me about doing a job like supply chain or something, not I don't wanna knock that. That's a very, very important part of any organization. It just isn't where my unique strengths and interests lie. And they wanted me to do that, not because I would be good at it, but actually kind of the opposite. They wanted me to punch my ticket there so that I could prove that I could do it, so that I could be this well-rounded executive someday and say that I had done my time there. And that to me sounded like a 2-year, not a death sentence, but certainly a penance, and I said, "Well, I'd really love to do a stint in learning and development. I love it. I haven't gotten to work there officially, but I do some extra parts of my job that had to do with learning and development." I said, "I'd love to do that." And they said, "No, we already know you can do that. We need you to show us you can do this."
Mm.
And so it was like their plan for me, but not my plan for myself. And that is why I ended up opting out. I got a job full time in learning and development. And it was really about following my passions instead of somebody else's plan for me, which is why later in my career I became so passionate about talent management and talent strategy and how do you make that a two-way discussion with people so that it's what the company wants and needs, but it's also what the individual wants and needs. But ultimately, I left the learning and development job because my husband had a great job. We ended up having a child, and he was traveling all over, and we couldn't both do that. It just wasn't going to work in our world. And so a lot of my work decisions were predicated on personal needs. But it ended up and I thought I would just go corporate for a couple years. I thought, "Oh, I'll just do this part-time for a little while." And then I got pregnant again. God blessed me with 2 children pretty quick, pretty close together. I did not plan it that way, but, we don't always get to make those plans. And what I thought would just be a very short-term gig ended up being 18 years, and it led me all over the world. It was amazing. I loved it. So, I'm not sorry that I left corporate, but what initially made me leave wasn't so much that my job sucked. It
Mm.
was that it just didn't work in my world, if that makes any sense.
No, that's excellent. So just so I can get this clear, so you left corporate, you got into learning development. Was that the entrepreneur type work,
Um,
or was that a
or
different position?
It
Sorry.
was a different position before I
Different.
became an entrepreneur. So I
Okay.
started out doing learning and development full time for a company, which was great. I got all these certifications and kind of got myself immersed in that world. And then about 10 months later, I had my first child. Basically, when I got there and took the job, I did not know, but I think I got pregnant like a month later. So I can't remember the exact timing, but it was a short stint. And I hadn't expected it to be that way. But when I went back to work the first day, I said, I think I want to do this part time. And I thought I was just going to go part time for a few months. And then my boss left because she decided work sucks. No, she decided corporate sucks. She went out to be an entrepreneur, and I basically rode her coattails for a few years. I was doing some contract work for her, but again, it was like I used to say I was the accidental entrepreneur because I didn't plan to just start this business. I just thought I was working part-time and contract and then the phone started ringing and things started happening and the entrepreneur started taking off.
So walk
Um,
us through that kind of 18-year chapter. What was kind of the
yeah,
work you were doing as an entrepreneur?
sure. So I had really focused a lot on management and leadership development. So I did training for managers and leaders and ended up just like I said, the phone started ringing. I used some tools that were well known, management curriculums, things like that, and ended up going to 6 continents, I think. I worked with over 150 companies. And I mean, I'm not talking like public symposiums where you have like one person from a company. I'm talking 150 distinct and different individual engagements where I got to know these companies. And so I got to talk about management techniques and great leadership in all kinds of different cultures, different places, different industries. And so that was the majority of my business for about 16 years. And then through a series of, well, I really just one big personal shocking moment, it all changed. So that was the beginning. That was the first part of my rebalancing act. I found out my husband was having an affair, and it was sudden and it was shocking, and I asked him to leave all in about an hour. And there's a whole story there. It's in my book. But that day I was like, everything's going to change. And he tried to say, nothing's going to change. And I said, no, it has to change because I'm going to need insurance and benefits and stability. And I can't continue to do my own thing and feel good. And it was in hindsight, had I known what the next few years would look like, I probably would have just kept my company because I had some missteps on the way. And that's another whole podcast episode, probably, but selling your company and
Yeah.
what to avoid and all that kind of stuff. But I decided to sell my company. I went to work for the company that I sold it to for a couple years, and that was sort of my dipping my toe back in the water of corporate life. And then I ended up going full time, and actually, it was a client who brought me in full time. So I just knew that college was around the corner for my two kids. They were 14 and 16 when my
Mm.
marriage unraveled. Been married 22 years. I didn't expect it to take that turn, but now I look back and I'm kind of thankful because I got out of a not good situation and my life is so much better now. But that's another whole story. But that's why I went back corporate. And like I said, if I had it to do over again, I might not have made those same choices because I probably could have made it work staying on my own, but I didn't want the uncertainty.
Mm.
And I felt like, okay, now's the time. I always said I'd go back to corporate. Now's probably the time for me to do that. And I'm thankful it was a client where I knew a lot of people. So it wasn't like just starting all over, but it was hard. Oh my gosh, was it hard going back? And I spent 7 years in corporate, got 2 enroll promotions. I think I wanted to prove to myself I could be a vice president. I don't know why, but I thought that would be some big, exciting thing. And then I realized, you know what I did as a vice president most of the time?
What?
I went to meetings.
Nice.
I went
Yeah,
to
that's
meetings
usually
and I
what it
ran
is.
air cover for my team. And it was just
Yeah.
meeting after meeting. And what was most interesting for me about that is that I stopped doing a lot of the work that I love to do. So instead of being the one making the difference, making the contribution, doing the things, I was directing the people who were doing the things, which was great. But it was I kinda decided that wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It was great for a time, and and because I say if I knew then what I know now, I might not have made that move, but I'm so thankful for all the learning and growth that I had 25 years into my work life. I had all this great learning and growth going back into corporate, and I think I'm better for having done that.
No, Carol, thanks for sharing that. That's incredible that with all those things that happened to you in your life, how you kind of turned it into these positives. So, congratulations on that.
Well,
That's really,
thank
really
you.
awesome.
I probably wouldn't have
I
said they were positive at the time,
sure, other
hindsight
choice words,
helps.
I'm sure, right? I'm
Some of
sure,
it
but
did suck.
yeah,
That whole work sucks part.
which ended up liking as some aspects. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So one of the things we talk about, Carol, on the show is that success is not good luck; it's a matter of good skills. I'm very curious when you went from your 18 years of being an entrepreneur back into corporate. What was the
yeah.
one skill that you had? You said it was hard, it was challenging. What was the one skill you were trying to develop now that you were back in corporate to be successful?
Wow, I am so glad you asked that question because it is the one skill that I think a lot of leaders miss, a lot of people in general miss, and I know I had missed it because, like I said, I was teaching leadership for years, so I should have known everything there was to know about how to be a great leader. And then I went on the inside and it was like, whoa, this is tough. And the skill is influence.
Mm.
And so it I I learned a lot about influence. I was very deliberate about honing that skill. Thankfully, I worked with some people. We did an assessment for executives where they would look at 3 aspects of these executives. They'd look at their management skills. So, how well do you manage people? They would look at their technical or professional skills. So if your job is finance, for instance, what skills do you have in the financial realm that qualify you to do the job? So it was that type of skill level. But then the third bucket was influence. And influence is that whole aspect of how do you inspire people and bring them along with your ideas and your plans, especially when they don't have to do what you say, when they don't work for you. And I was in a role, so I went back in. Originally, my role in corporate when I went back was reimagining their learning and development organization. So starting from scratch, kinda. I mean, just revamping it, getting it current, getting it best in class, so to speak, I guess. But it was important to influence the entire organization, but yet nobody reported to me. So it's all
Mm.
about that relationship collateral that you're building. It's about having the ideas that make them want to listen to you, but also presenting them in a way that inspires them and makes them want to come on this journey. Because nobody had to do what I asked, and to be effective, I had to create pull for what it is that I was hoping to build.
Can you give us an
And
example? I really love this. Can you give us like an
yeah,
example that stands out?
yeah. So, for instance, I wanted to. Oh gosh, there's so many. So, when we wanted to have a talent strategy, a lot of companies talk about talent strategy, and some people say, "What even is that?" Talent is just a fancy word for people. A talent strategy is deciding how you're going to treat people, and it informs the culture. And ultimately, I was helping drive the culture for a 22,000 person organization. And so, questions like, do we pay for performance? Do we want to differentiate pay for good performance? Okay. If we say that, so how long are we willing to tolerate poor performance? What happens when someone's a poor performer? How long should we tolerate it if they've been with the company 30 years? How long should we tolerate it if they're in a really critical position that our stakeholders care a lot about? And so instead of this being some HR policy driven thing where you just say, hey, everybody, here's our talent strategy. We're going to do this kind of pay system and we're going to have this kind of performance management system. Instead of just telling them what it was going to look like, which I think is a mistake a lot of companies make, I enrolled the executives into the conversation. So we did a survey. I asked them those very questions. How long do we tolerate poor performance? Do you think it's important to differentiate our development opportunities based on performance? How do we define high potential? Because a lot of people think they know what it looks like. And then when you talk across different teams, you realize they have very different opinions about that. So we had surveys. So I gathered data and then we did discussions so that they could be part of it. And the cool thing about that was it became their initiative, not mine. So then they were walking the talk saying, hey, we believe in pay for performance. We believe in accountability. We believe that it's not just getting the results, but it's having behaviors that are driving success and you're not rolling over people on your way to get results. So they started talking about those very same things. And it was just a really rewarding experience to feel like I had created something that they bought into and they championed instead of me just trying to say, hey, let's do this. So I hope that example shows the impact.
Carol, that's amazing. I love the fact that you call out the skill as influence. So for the past, I'm 38 years old. So for the past probably 18, 19 years of my life, I've been studying how to win friends and influence people, right, from Dale Carnegie. And I guess if you were to summarize the status of corporate America, right, it gets kind of this bad rep, it's an enemy. What would you describe is the status of corporate today? Why does it suck?
Oh my. Somebody said to me the other day, corporate America is just one giant dumpster fire. I was like,
I like
yeah, you're kind of right.
that.
I think that there are several factors. I think we have a lot of people who are afraid to tell the unvarnished truth. And so I've been always amazed at how much people will say to talk around the truth instead of just speaking the truth. Way too much politicking on that front. I also think that although I understand that shareholders are important, when you can only make decisions for shareholders and you only make decisions for your business in 3-month increments based on what you're going to have to share with the board of directors or the public, it's dangerous. And you've got to have enough foresight to be able to move beyond that. And I think we have a severe lack of that. I mean, true leadership, that we need management, we need leadership. They're both very important skills. But true leadership sees down the street and around the corner and sees what's coming next and plans for it. And if you don't have any capital set aside, any reserves set aside, and by reserves, I mean time, energy, people, not just money, but reserves set aside to do the work that matters, that's going to get you where you really want to be in 5 years. If you aren't planning for that and you're only planning for what are we going to do that's going to look really good on the P&L and the balance sheet this 3-month period, you're not going to make it very far, very long. And I've watched way too many companies struggle through that. And I think that's actually probably the responsibility for that largely is on the leadership team.
Mm, I love
Because if
that.
they had the ability to stand up and have that longer term view and maybe the skill of influence to help bring people along with that longer term view, they'd be able to get more support from the shareholders.
No, that's great. So, talk to us, Carol, about how your book, The Rebalancing Act, can help corporate today.
Oh, goodness. Well, the Rebalancing Act is a combination of my own story, which I've shared a whole lot about today. But it's also the interviews I did with over 70 women and men. And so it's focused on working women, but I talk to men as well. And I think it's been a little surprising and made me very happy that the men are supporting my book as much as the women. But it's about the traps that we can run into in corporate America as we try to do all the things, please all the people, and be someone who we're really not deep down inside. So,
Mm,
I wanted to learn from people who had been there. What did they see? What did they see that got in the way of people's success? And we call those the traps. We have 7 archetypes that tend to show up. Women in the workplace show up as these 7 archetypes. Overloaded Olivia or lovable Lila or trailblazer Tess. Those are some of them. So we look at what those traps do to us and to the people around us. But more importantly, we have a lot of examples of how to get past them, past them and do a better job. And a lot of it has to do with understanding your uppermost values, what you stand for, and what is most important to you, living in alignment with that and not letting the other stuff derail you. Because it's so easy to kind of feel like your significance is driven by all that you accomplish and all that you
mm.
do in quantity terms instead of looking at the quality of it and am I even working on the right things. So the book has a lot of wisdom in it from people who have fallen into traps, got themselves out of it and figured out how to truly be great leaders and what to do instead of falling into those traps.
If the listeners of the show want to get a copy, where do you want them to go?
They can go anywhere they normally buy books. Obviously, Amazon is always an easy one for people. It's on Audible. It's at all the major booksellers, Barnes and Noble, all those. So they can find it anywhere. And they can also find a link to it on my website, which is my name, carolenneking.com.
Awesome. Well, Carol, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much today for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed our conversation.
What I appreciate most about Carol is that she proved something to herself first. She proved she could win in corporate. She proved she could lead. She proved she could climb. And then she realized that wasn't the point. Somewhere in the chase of doing and having, she lost a piece of herself, and it took personal pain, health scares, and a clash of values to bring her back to center. That's the rebalancing act. Corporate didn't fail her, it just had plans that didn't align with hers. And that's a powerful distinction. We don't have to burn everything down, but we do have to be honest about when something doesn't work in our world anymore. Success is not a matter of good luck, but good skill. Carol indicates an important skill today: influence. And I'm not talking about how many likes you have on your social media and social media influencers that are just doing passive entertainment. Influence more in the sphere of being how to inspire people, bringing them along, treating talent as human beings, not parts in a machine. Because people aren't meant to spin in their gears until retirement. They're meant to contribute, to grow, to matter. So maybe the question isn't whether corporate America is a dumpster fire. Maybe the better question is, are you building a path that actually fits you? Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
And there's a wind that blows.